Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramona, and Ready. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. I am so thrilled to have you join us today. This podcast is dedicated to exploring the idea of doing business and living life with a purpose. We believe when we approach our work and our lives with a servant's heart, we can truly make a difference. We created this show for you because we want everyone to be motivated, inspired, and educated to impact your world, make a change. And the key word is your world. My guest today is going to talk about financial literacy, which I'm 63, I need to learn, as well as an 18 to 25-year-old. So this is going to be an incredible show. But while you're listening to him today, I want you to think about how you're going to serve today and what impact you want to create today. Key word is let's do it today. Let's not wait till next year. Let's start right now. Today's episode is proudly sponsored by our incredible partner, Pantheon Alliance. Imagine being part of an exclusive community of high-income, successful business owners and entrepreneurs from very diverse industries. Together, we are building a thought leader platform not only to change the world, but make an impact using our great networks and that money to make changes. So if you have any questions about Pantheon Alliance, please reach out to me. I'd love to talk to you about that. With that being said, money, and I've had a number of experts about money and finances and things like that. It's one of the most emotional things and uneducated things that's out there. And my guest is so powerful because as I was telling the stories that happened to me, finances got screwed up with my dad and bad things happened. So don't think, oh my God, I'm worried about losing money. There's much bigger problems than that. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Sorry for going on monologue, but I really wanted to present this because what you're doing is yeoman's work. It's God bless you because it's so emotional, right? Talk about the emotions and money.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's emotional, very difficult to talk about from generation to generation. And at some point, really things have kind of gotten lost in terms of even educating, and the education system has done a terrible job of actually, what I would call consumer finance, a cross between math and finance that you really need on a daily basis, whether it's writing a check, whether it's buying a car, whether it's saving for a down payment for a house, or even, understanding your student loans, which is kind of a disaster now, people are really in the dark and you're really coming either out of high school or college, unless you had a parent. And I would also say, bring up a mentor, people that can try to help, put people in the right direction, because not everybody starts at the same place in the race. Price Waterhouse did a study about a year ago, and they put out to millennials just, simple topics about money. And only about 24% of the millennials that took the test even came close to passing it. And, it's really a shame that, you get a lot of people super educated, but they don't understand anything about what's the most important thing is how to manage your day-to-day finances.
Literacy is a big word. We could say uneducated, need to learn, but you added literacy, and I'm glad you did because it's that serious, right?
Yeah, I would say it's a crisis at this point. And all you have to do is look at the extent of student loans, credit card debt, auto debt. And, you have a lot of people coming out of college between the student loans and any of the credit cards they have, it's going to be very difficult for them to ever get a home, in the next 10, 15 or 20 years. So if you don't have the home or you don't have a base, it's very difficult to really start a family, and, and save for the long run. And you mentioned before, when we were talking before the show, someone mentioned to you that you need to put, 10% away and just kind of forget about it. The longer that you wait to do that, the harder it is to really, take a step back and understand the benefit of, compounding and letting the money grow over time. And, you have to put a whole lot more in a lot less short of a time.
I was 28 and I did spend half of it once I looked at it. So you're right. I didn't keep it. It was gone probably 2 or 3 years later. And that's, I think, the education part for young people. It's like, and answer this, Jeff. Hey, I'm 25. I got 100,000 in the bank. I've got 70 more years of life. Why not enjoy it?
Well, the answer is, and anyone, you could ask anyone, if you're 40, 50, 60, life is really just a blink of an eye, unfortunately. And we're just like a piece of, just a dot of sand, in the scheme of things. And time goes by so fast that, the longer that you wait to save, or if you just get in, I'll use the example of wealth transition over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. There's significant amounts of money that are changing between generations, but the younger generations really haven't been taught or have learned really how to handle it or manage it. So unfortunately, a lot of it's going to be wasted. And I don't think that's really what anyone wants in the end.
Yeah. The other problem with money is friends and family. They give you advice. They give you tips. It's like, I don't want my mechanic doing heart surgery on me. I want the heart surgeon to do it. How important is it you or an expert like you to come to you and go, here's where I'm at, help me out?
And, I think that goes with really any age, whether it's, starting out, putting money into a 401k, how much should you put in, or going as far to say, well, you're approaching Social Security, looking at Medicare, when should you take it? Oftentimes people will listen to their family, friends, coworkers about their decisions, and, their life situation could be, 180 degrees different. And so that's why, as you approach certain ages, it's important to work with someone that can try to get to understand your situation and try to help you make an informed decision, because, certain things as you approach retirement, or even starting out, shifting from, we'll say, your parents' healthcare onto your own, your employer plan, that when you start working, some of these things are irreversible, so you need to understand everything on the front end and not have to be in a position where you have to backpedal.
Irreversible is a terrible word. It is
a
terrible word in the definition of what happens irreversible. It's gone.
Yeah. And it's, and I look back, I look and say, even having a basic budget, and there's really people starting out should really focus. That should be the foundation of where you work from. And then I also see people that have just had income coming in their whole life, and they're not really used to budgeting. They've gotten it down where they understand what's coming in from their employment, from maybe some passive income, and they've just gotten accustomed to that. Well, the reality of it is, a lot of that may end, and you have to really start looking at a budget to say, well, we really need to kind of get our expenses under control because we just don't have the income coming in.
Yeah. Interesting. And thank you for your service. I want to mention that your Army experience, but I think discipline is a huge proponent of this. What did you learn in the Army that people can take that you can give to us, that lesson of discipline with money?
Yes. So, I would say really it's kind of a backstory. I was the first one to go to college in my family, so I really didn't understand what was really even going on. I kind of went through the process and had a lot of fun. And it's like anything else, when you have fun too much, eventually the bill comes due. And, in this case, I received a notice from Sallie Mae, which is a loan servicer, that said, I was going to owe like $1,000 a month for the next 10 years. And, I realized I needed to do something because I really didn't have, the job market wasn't good back then. I didn't really have, I wasn't trained really to do anything. And so the Army had a program that if you enlisted, went in, they would pay off your loans over time. And so, from that, you really wake up and understand structure, discipline, as well as just being able to interact and, work with all kinds of people, whether someone that went to West Point, that came from a very affluent background in some cases versus someone that came out of the mountains of West Virginia or Tennessee or wherever. And so, I think in the end, I would go back and say, if I could do it over again, I would have went in the Army before I ever went to college, because you really wake up, you understand responsibility, and it gets back to irreversibility. In the military, if you make a mistake, it could affect everyone, that you're with, and it could result in, a tragedy in a lot of cases. And so it also gets back to honesty and just developing a structure to kind of work from. And I think that's probably what I took away from the Army more so than I ever did from college, as well as just to learn that I needed to kind of put some of the pieces together. And, when I was thinking about writing a book, a lot of people write books for, retirees. I was looking and saying, well, where is there really a need? And I look at, the kids coming out these days that are just kind of coming out with, they're getting bills from all these different loan servicers. They have credit card debt, that they accumulated during college, and they're trying to make informed decisions. And it's just very difficult to do that.
Yeah, I like that. Let's get into the book, because I really love what you're doing with the book. Talk about the mission and your goal with the book.
Yeah, so the goal is to provide education and really a framework or blueprint for young people. And, I've tried to, incorporate where I think it's very difficult for a parent or grandparent to bridge a lot of these conversations. My book is designed to be helpful, where it can take you from budgeting, all the way through, just even talking about things like insurance that you wouldn't normally think about. And I use the example of, why would someone young need any type of insurance? Well, auto insurance is typically going to be required in any state. So it's a good idea to understand what you're buying. And then at the same time, I say, well, if you have a pet, a dog, given that, we see a lot of, if you go down the highway, you'll see 8 of 10 or 7 of 10 of the billboards are attorneys, so you want to make sure you cover yourself for liability purposes, because, you could save all the money in the world, but if you make, if the dog bites your neighbor, all of that money might be gone. So, what I've found is, you have to have a framework, and you have to, really customize or tailor it to, the individual set of circumstances and situation. And, in the book, I've tried to make, QR codes, hypotheticals. I don't try to say this is the right way to budget, the wrong way. I try to provide all the different considerations and options, whether it's, leasing a car, buying a car. It's a matter of just understanding what your choices are that can allow you to make an informed decision.
I love that you do that, because every financial situation should be customizable. Everybody's different.
Yeah.
Like your nutrition's different. We won't get into that. You just broke the record on my podcast. You're my 500th podcast. No financial advisors talked about dogs. And I'm saying that that's unbelievable thinking outside the box. Is we have dogs. We don't think about, you buy a neighbor, they have $100,000 surgery. Bye-bye.
No, and and I like dogs. I in a lot of cases I like dogs a lot more than I do people at this point, and animals for that matter. So I use the other example, and I say, well, what if you've lived with a partner, say, for the past 3 or 4 years after college, have thought about getting married, really haven't gotten around to it. You buy a townhouse. You buy it in your name as an example, but he or she lives there with you. You have a pet together, and then something happens to you, you pass away. There's no will, documents, or anything. Guess who gets everything? Potentially your family, who you may not even talk to. And so, there are consequences regardless of what age you are. And that's why it's so important just to take kind of a step back and really try to focus and get these simple thing that they're not simple, because they're overwhelming when you put them all together. But if you can work through, it's like a list, we'll call it a honeydew list, if you will. If you can work through that and get to the other side, it will allow you to really not have these, we'll say, potholes in life that happen.
You just proved how complex this is. You went from potential partnership marriage to dogs. I mean, talk about a spectrum that people don't think about, which leads to my question. And I know you're going to have a great answer. So I have a lot of 25, 40-year-olds listening. They're going, God, Jeff, this sounds great. Taking that first step, action. What should that be? Because I think that's the most important.
Yeah, I always say the most important thing is to take a step back and look at and really do a financial, we'll call it financial life inventory plan. And really what you want to do is take a step back, look at where you are right now, good, bad, or otherwise. You want to be honest. If you have debt, you want to categorize it. And then you want to look at, what are your saving options? Meaning, does your employer match? And you want to put all the pieces together there, and you want to look and work through everything. And especially if you're married, you're in a relationship, you want to be upfront about your situation and work through it together. And, I've used the example of, two people that work for two large employers. A lot of times you could coordinate each other's benefits, but a lot of times what I see when I meet with couples, they'll have they'll have separate health plans, separate everything, but if they actually come together and merge things, in a lot of ways, you end up with savings that you can use to either pay down debt or, save for, the long term.
The rainy day thought, save for a rainy day.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I asked what step they should step forward, and you actually telling them, which I 100% agree, backwards first. Take that step backwards.
And at the same time, if you can mark up or have a sheet that has everything, consolidated in inventory, and look at each one and say, well, what am I going to break off? It's like a puzzle, but rather, it's a puzzle that you're trying to put together, and you really have to put the pieces together over time. If you try to do everything on a weekend, you're going to drive yourself crazy and you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and that's really it. And it's really a matter, whether it's shopping for car insurance or, whether it's looking for a new bank account, you want to take a step back from it. You want to do your research, because I've said before, Google, you could put any financial topic in there and probably get 300 million results, but they're all over the place. And a lot of times they're sponsored, by someone that's, probably doesn't have your best interest in mind always. So, it's a matter of gathering the information in each area and then working through it, but not trying to do it all at one time, because that's where you just get overwhelmed and you just stop before you even, in a lot of cases, start.
I'm just going to say YouTube is not your answer for financial literacy. Fix your plumbing. Maybe you got a pipe broken or your car part needs to be changed. Yeah, but not with finances. Goals. Well, let me go back to this. Numbers. I've been told a lot, and I think you probably agree with this. You should be always looking at your numbers regularly, whether it's weekly, monthly. How important is that for the literacy?
Well, I think it's, one of the things I think it's important for is really, sometimes you put things away. And I use the example of the most, a lot of employees now will start a company and they'll do an auto enrollment where they just automatically get enrolled and money starts going in their account, which is great. But what you really want to do is look at it over time, because the more that, you shouldn't look at it every day. There's different things. So like, a long-term investment like a 401k, really you should look at every 3 or 4 months and see how it's going. Your bank account, you should look at every week to make sure there isn't anything that you're not sure that is yours. In other words, somebody, there's a fraud or something like that. But, you want to make sure it all works together. And I use the example of, you should always have, your operating account, which everyone typically will, where your direct deposit goes in and your bills go out, but you need to have an account linked, typically a high yield savings or an account like a money market that's linked to that, where, if you have a surplus, hopefully you can move that money before you end up spending it at Starbucks or spend it on something that, you just never use again.
Literacy, this is my favorite question, because literacy can help mental health. It's an issue right now. It's suicide's highest it's ever been. When somebody gets educated or has financial literacy, are they reducing stress and helping their mental health?
I would argue they are. And I would say, in my business, it's finance, but it's also behavioral. And I think it's heavily tilted towards psychology and just even, whether the market's moving up or down, or, with the changes, there's a lot of things that will keep people up at night. And, and I'll argue, suicide, it's obviously something that we certainly have to work on as a society. The other side is just lack of sleep and stress, and the amount of, potential health issues that are caused by people just because they're not, they're not sure where to find the information. And sometimes I found, a lot of times if you can get ahead of it, the problems, getting behind, it's once you're behind, that's not the time to try to see where you're at. And sometimes you have to, but the sooner that you can get a handle on your finances and, and I would say your life for that matter, the easier it will be, to not have sleepless nights.
I like it. Handle part is important. It's like if you're 100,000 in debt, don't try to get it unless you win the lottery. You're not going to fix it by the weekend. It's Thursday, Friday today. By Sunday, you're not going to fix it. So working slowly through it, right?
And there's different kinds of when you're paying back debt, there's all kinds of variations of ways to do it. A lot of times people go at the highest interest. What is the highest interest, and you go for that first. Sometimes people will go and say, well, what's the lowest balance? Because if you can get little wins, it'll influence you, to allocate more money to getting that debt down.
I'm fired up right now, Jeff. You're awesome.
Oh,
no,
thank you.
I know a little bit about money, but this is the perfect example. I've had multiple guests, and all of them, like you, have taught me something. Audience, that's the power of this. I know there's a ton of financial advisors or wealth managers, but it's so important to find that one person because stress and all that.
Yeah. And we say it's like a relationship. It's really like a chemistry test. You want to make sure, you fit with the person that you're working with, because, they're going to tell you to do things that you're probably not going to do. And if you don't like them or you don't feel comfortable with them, you're not going to do it. And so that's really what I always tell people. If you're worried about something, it doesn't have to be, your investments. It can be, I saw something about, the estate or tax or, my something, where beneficiary, all kinds of things, do I have to worry about that? Or, like identity theft is an example, what can I do to help not become a victim? So there's things that you can do. It's a matter of having someone, I would say, as almost like a financial quarterback to try to help work through that.
Big sports guy, you nailed it with that. He's guiding. It's a perfect analogy I'll remember. Can you tell us a story of a client you work with, what they start, of course, don't give numbers, but what they started with and what the end result was by giving them more education?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more of a level of confidence, if you will. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, and it gets back to kind of retirement, if you will. Different people have different ways of looking at, how much, what is my number? That's what always people say. What's my number? How much do I need to put in every month to make up, where do I have to make up to get to where I need to be? And the question really, or the answer to that is really, it depends on your individual specific situation. And what you want is to work through that. And, I always say, one of the biggest hindrances to really a comfortable retirement is debt. The more debt you bring in, the more you have to service that. And the more it takes away from, pension, Social Security, your assets, and the less from traveling and doing things that you probably would want to do. And so really, with most people, I say it's always a good idea if you're 5, 10, 15 years away, really to look at it and say, when do I think I can retire? Can I retire? And then where are some variations around that? And a lot of people will say, I'm going to work till I die. That's what people say sometimes. The reality is, your health often gets in the way. And so, the last thing you want to do is start having health issues, when you're not able to put in what you thought you were able to put in. And you want to have a plan in place, before you're 6 months away from retiring. And again, if you haven't put a plan in place, it's not the end of the world. It's a matter of working forward. And, that's part of it. Sometimes we get so focused in the rear view mirror, I'll call it, that we don't really see what's going on moving forward. And, and some of the goals for retirement may have nothing to do with, your finances, or it may just be, you worked your whole life, you want to spend more time with your family, and so there's ways that you can work through that, or even, more to charities, more to hobbies. But like I've always said, and this is a good, so, I have clients that say, well, I've always wanted to play golf. I haven't had a chance because, it takes 6, 7, 8 hours a time, and I'm always working or with family. So when I retire, that's going to be my primary focus. Well, that's not necessarily going to work well if you've never really done it or you're comfortable doing it. You want to make sure you try things out. And it's kind of like, used to be parents would say, well, we're going to throw you in 3 or 4, 5 activities, and we'll see what 2 or 3 stick. Now it seems like a lot of parents say, well, you're going to do this, and so I use the argument also with retirement, you want to take it for a test drive before you actually, before you buy it, in other words, and retire. You want to see, what you enjoy, where you want to live. You want to work through things and give yourself time to figure that out before you just flip a switch and stop.
What a great message. That's fantastic. It's whatever people need to listen. And you out there above 50, like I am, this is all for us too. There's a different model for it, but that's what I love about education. Like you said at the beginning, yeah, the millennials need help, but so do the 50, 60, 70, 80-year-olds. So.
No, and I mean, I'll use the example. I mean, I'll use the example of identity theft as an example. I have, situation where I've had people who thought, they're not internet based. They don't have a computer. They don't have a smartphone. And they thought, well, how could, I don't have to worry about my identity because it's not online, not out there. Well, they go to the doctor, a fair amount. Well, there was an issue where there was a data breach. And so, you end up in a situation where whether you like it or not, you have to do certain things to protect yourself, or, your family is going to be working with you to try to work through those things.
It's a great story because seniors do that. They're like, oh, I'm disconnected from the internet. No, you're not. That's a great point. Didn't even think about that. Well, we've come to the end here. This went so fast. I learned so much. You're a rock star, but
no,
go ahead.
No, I appreciate the time today, Steve, and enjoyed discussing everything with you.
No, this is great. I've got a fun question for you. We talked about a bunch of serious stuff, which is very important. But I want to ask you this question. So you've got a table reserved at a restaurant, a table for 4. You, of course, going to sit in one chair. In the other 3 chairs, dead or alive, who would you invite? Why would you invite them? And what food would you order?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I would probably say I would have surf and turf. So you get a little bit of for everything. That's the easy response. I would say, I would probably have Frank Sinatra would be one. I would probably have a serious table, where I would have people that would be serious. And then I would have another one that I would probably prefer. I'd have like Frank Sinatra. I'd probably have, I would have Johnny Carson probably there, and just, some people that would make me, I'd probably bring in Seinfeld and just probably have some people just to laugh, because I think in the end, when you talk about the news and everything going on these days, if you could just have more entertainment, we'll call it, where people are just kind of laughing for laughing's sake, as opposed to laughing at other people's expense, it goes, I think, a long way.
Yeah, if I would pay for another seat in that table, that would be so much fun. Plus, the food sounds fantastic.
Yes. Hopefully, it's cooked properly, right?
Well, that's the key. I hope it's a good restaurant. Absolutely. Yes. So what's the name of your podcast? And we didn't talk about, but you have a podcast. What's it called?
Yeah. So it's called Between Life and Money. So it's really talking about balancing life and money, which is kind of like what we're talking about here in the end. And I think that, that's the hardest thing in life with all the technology and all the productivity. In a lot of ways, we've even found a way to even find less balance with it. And, we're constantly available, constantly going, sometimes even, I use the example of just teaching, financial literacy to, children, if you're on vacation, there's games that you can play there, Monopoly, Life, a lot of those, type of interactions, those are the things that the kids will remember in the long run, and I think if you can do things like that, they also teach lessons about life and money as well.
Yeah, I love it. So the book, name of the book again, and where can we find it?
Yeah, so it's called Your Future Is Now, and it's a guide to understanding finances and gaining independence. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and where all books are sold. But like I mentioned, I really have set it up to try to be a framework and to regardless of your age, to have some takeaways from. And really, that is really what I want from it, is to really try to help people worry less and try to help point them in directions that maybe they didn't think about before.
That's great. Now, how can people contact you, reach out to you, support you?
Sure. You can always go to my website, balancewealthpartners.com. I also have a book website that's just jeffreypanic.com, and it's panic with a K. You can imagine I've heard a few things over the years.
Just going to say
about panicking. Yeah. So you never want to panic, whether it was the Army or the business I'm in now. Regardless of what you take away from it, never panic. And I know that more than anyone. So that's my last name. So
absolutely. No, I love it. And Jeff, you're a beacon of light in financial industry. I really appreciate you being on and taking the time and educating and motivating us. Thank you so much.
No, I appreciate you having me, and I really appreciate it, Steve.
You bet. And do me a favor, audience. Subscribe to the podcast. You're going to get wonderful guests like this. It's all about the guests. It's not me. I'm here just to facilitate, but to get great content like this, great information that can step you forward and actually change. What Jeff brought out today can change your life. I've seen it with great advisors, can change people's lives. So reach out to him, comment on the YouTube channel, comment on the podcast. If you need information to get to Jeff, I will do that. That's part of my job. Or reach out to him, ask questions. You can tell he's very literate when it comes to money. I want to take the literacy. He's literate. Right? I think I did that right. But me and Jeff want to thank you too so much for watching and listening to this podcast. And we do look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Have a great day.